2 now that the lawnmowers are past. So this is a Kanan, obviously. A friend of mine is doing a Kanan costume for Rebel Legion, and he wanted a lightsaber, so I made him a lightsaber. Took about 3 days. The first day I pretty much got the majority of the hilt done, and all the stuff that went along with it, to include the pommel and figuring out the geometry of the emitter and whatnot, to include like the angle of the grips and the width and the dimensions. That was all done the first day, to include like the first layer of powder coat, but of course I had to do it again because I made mistakes on the second day and had to do a whole bunch of stuff over. But really the things that I'm most proud of are the way the pommel turned out and the emitter, just because they were pre-made parts. Well, not the emitter, that was just raw tubes, but the pommel is just the MHS stuff that I cut the threads off of and opened up the number 2 so that 1 1/8 inch tube could slide all the way through it. And then this was one of the new style 4s, I think it's a 4, and it had a 1 1/4 inner diameter, so I had to put a little shim in there so that it would mate up with the 1 1/8 tube. And then that's pretty much the biggest challenge that I had. Everything else was just measure and cut, and I had a really good picture that framed almost perfectly on my television, so that I could pretty much just measure my TV, and those are the dimensions that I ended up going with for the final product, to include like the angle of this right here and the angle of this right here. And I mean, the tsuba is a little bit thinner, but again, it's just a steel washer that I ended up beveling the edges a little bit so that it gives a little bit of the cupped appearance. But for the most part, it's pretty close. And as you can see with the pictures, I had it pretty much held right up to it, and it matches pretty darn close, but not perfectly, of course, but pretty darn close. The box was another pre-made part that came off of Park's Axis, and I didn't think I was ever going to use that part again, just like with the rest of the parts that I can somehow find a use for. But hey, great. So yeah, the head doesn't come off like in the show, but I still wanted something, so I did this so that if you undo this part, then this slides open. You can get to the Crystal Focus version 4 in there, and ideally the SD card. But one of the problems that I ran into on day 3 was formatting wasn't taking, and SD cards that I was using, multiple, they just weren't playing nicely. Older tech, older formats and stuff like that. So I just went with an old SD card that I had that had already been formatted for a V4, and that's the only one that'll work. And so all of this process of making the tray slide out is pretty useless, because you can't change any configuration settings otherwise. Yeah, so anyway, at least it works. Recharge port is under the knob here. There's a white LED inside there, because on the picture you don't actually see the pins, it just shows up as 2 white dots. And my friend was like, hey, wouldn't that be cool if there was a white LED shining through? And I was like, yeah, I think I can do that. Obviously I did, but anyway, that's where that comes from. But I got some pins for him if he wants to put those in. They fit perfectly. They came from a Anakin Revenge of the Sith, I think one of the old Hasbros, but either way I had them and they fit, so may as well use them, or not, whatever. So this is, like I said, a Crystal Focus version 4. And it's using the little 3/4 inch speaker, the high bass one. They're not necessarily optimized for the V4s, so the sound doesn't quite match up very well. If I had used a Regal, that would have been different, but it still sounds pretty good if you ask me. So anyway, V4, awesome. I know how to do this, really.
Novastar.
So I got Novastar,
TFU Star Killer,
which I really like. That's the Ventress font. I always forget the name of that one. Light Meat, Dark Meat, and Stygian General. I remember that one. But got a couple of Eye-Saber tracks. You know, kind of rebel themed tracks and stuff like that. So still looks good. It's Tricree, by the way, the RGB with the blue and the green in series, because the couldn't push enough current to put them in parallel, so I put them in series, and still looks good. So. Really, that's the meat and potatoes of it. It's using one of the augmented blades, but don't really need it. It just looks really good with the blue and the green. So it's what I think is a pretty darn close to Kanan look. So if you can tell or not. Anyway, that's about it. That's the Kanan. I forgot to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but since I forgot it, I'm not worried about it. So that's it. See you later. Nothing?